I, uh, I give up. I give up. Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny, and
Kenny squared.
with the sports on the Positive Tip podcast. And so, Kenny, how you doing?
I'm doing good. We're full blown back into school mode.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
fun. Um, and yeah, it's September is one of the best months for sports. So
yeah. Oh, no doubt. And we're right in the thick of it. And so I'm gonna jump in right here because I have a little comment for you. Anytime, anytime your baseball team is a little bit sick, and they are right now because of all the injuries too, and they hadn't been playing that great, I have the perfect antidote for your team. It is called the Minnesota Twins. And,
yep.
um, and, and listen, we're positive tip, man, but the Twins are just letting the opportunity go out the window here. I think when I looked this morning, they're only one game over 500 now. They're gonna let your Guardians out there run away with this division if they don't straighten themselves out here pretty quickly. It's not like the Guardians are burning it up. I mean, I think they're 5 games over 500, but I just think that the in every sport there's always a team that has another team's number, but I don't remember it lasting for as long as it's lasted with the Yankees and Twins here. So talk about your team here. What is it, 4 straight now that they've won? They won that last game in Tampa. Sketchy call at the end of that
Oh
game,
yeah.
but listen, escape with the win. Now it was good. Judge is just on fire, but you get the Twins in, and so let's give you some space and talk about how you're feeling about your team right now. You were a little concerned about the injuries you were telling me yesterday.
Yeah. Well, I read you off this lineup. This was obviously
Yeah,
doubleheader lineups are gonna be thin
yeah.
anyway. But this was the lineup from yesterday, and I'm gonna ask you again. Do you know four guys in this lineup? You probably do, but Oswaldo Cabrera played right field, Aaron Judge the DH, Gleyber Torres at second, Ronald Guzman at first base, Miguel Andujar in left, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa at third, Esteban Florial at center, Kyler Gashioka behind the plate, and Oswald Peraza at shortstop.
That
Um,
that's that's not exactly, Ruth Gehrig and DiMaggio. Not exactly, yeah, that's a tough lineup, but they won. They've been
yeah,
winning.
but they
So
win. Um, I think still the injuries is kind of concerning because, as you probably know, Rizzo has hit the injured list. He
yes.
got an epidural on his back and has now been dealing with migraine. So they say he's probably going to be back when he's available, but we'll see. Also, and this is kind of one of those Yankee things. If they kind of hint that someone's hitting the injury list, they probably are. They did that with DJ LeMahieu yesterday, so
Ugh.
he might be out for a little bit. Not great news on Matt Carpenter either, who got another X-ray. It still shows a fracture, so they're not saying he's out for the year, but he's probably out for the year. They said they're going to give it a couple more weeks and try again. But despite the injuries, once again though, like sometimes injuries can be a good excuse, but also like you have the depth for a reason. Judge obviously he's hit 4 home runs in the last 5 games. He's knocking on the door of history. He now has the most home runs in a single season by any right-handed hitter in Yankee history,
It's
which is
amazing.
kind of an
Yeah.
incredible feat. Um, but I think when you look at it overall, um, like first of all, I think this Yankee team kind of needed a little bit of the fire under them because kind of coasting all the way through. I mean, you saw it last year with the White Sox, where they didn't play a meaningful game past like June,
Yeah.
and then they just got killed in the postseason.
Hmm.
The Astros, that's not going to be a problem with them because they're so postseason tested. But for the Yankees, I could see them sleeping through a series and kind of losing it there. But something I want to point out, which I think is kind of interesting. So, Josh Donaldson also is not available. He's on the paternity list. Congratulations to him.
Hmm.
He's also been awful though the last like really all year, but specifically the last couple months.
Yeah, his stats are
Um,
way off when I looked at them. Yeah, 219,
yeah,
I think he was batting, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, he has not been good. But Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, who was brought over as a shortstop, but he won a Gold Glove at third base, has played third base the last couple games because there's really no one else to play third base. And I feel like he's felt more comfortable there. I mean, the guy who's hit 3 home runs all year hit a grand slam last night.
Oh wow,
Um,
wow,
so I mean, I think he might be feeling more comfortable there. Defensively, it kind of works better because then you have Peraza, who's like one of their hot shot prospects. His natural position is shortstop, so he should be playing shortstop, not second base or wherever. So I think
yeah,
it kind of works out better that way. I
yeah,
hope that they keep it. Knowing the Yankees, they probably won't. But I think having Kiner Falefa there at third and then Peraza at short should be what they do next year.
yeah.
Um, like I said, I don't really have a lot of hope that they'll do that, but um, I do like that. Another big thing, Nestor Cortez will be pitching tonight. Coming off the injured list. It's like it's just so obvious, and I'm surprised that they're not going to do anything more. Like the guy wasn't really hurt; they just wanted to limit his innings. Like
Right,
it
right.
just it's I don't know. To me, it's just so obvious to that. Um, but he's facing off against Yankee legend Sonny Gray, so that'll be interesting.
Sonny
Um,
Gray's had a good career since he left the Yankees.
yeah,
Actually, he's found himself again. Um, I, I think that the Yankees to now a little bit of a pivot for me, right? Because these injuries have caught up, but it's still early September, right? Today's September 8th. Um, but in order for them to go deep into the playoffs and get to the World Series, these guys have got to get healthy, right? They've got to get some of these guys back. The lineup that they had yesterday is not going to get them far in the postseason. I don't anticipate that that'll be the lineup anyway. I think that some of their guys will be back. Doesn't sound like Carpenter will. Has there been a Harrison Bader sighting yet? No.
he's ramping up baseball activity.
Okay. Okay.
So they
Okay.
say he could be hitting rehab pretty soon. Oh, the other guy that's on his way back soon is Zach Britton.
That's
He's
good.
upgraded to
Yeah.
AAA.
Now I
Um,
thought he had a setback. You had told me.
yeah, he had during one of his rehab starts, he like just stopped pitching and like walked off the mound hurt. And
Right.
apparently, it was just like his butt or something like that. Like they said, it's an injured
You hurt
glute.
his butt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also,
Okay.
can I add this?
Yes.
The Yankees versus the Twins since 2002.
Oh
Yankees
Lord.
are 98 and 37, and they've won 22 of their last 24 meetings at Yankee Stadium. The Twins are 1 and 17 since 2017. Um, and also that doesn't include the playoffs. I believe the playoffs puts it at like 113 and 30 something.
I don't know what to say about that. I just because the Twins have been, exception of a few seasons here and there, they're overall in that period have been a pretty good team. You know,
Yeah.
I just and they've made the playoffs a lot of times, and I don't know what to say about that. The Yankees just have their number, and I don't know if it was. I'd love to. Maybe we could do that next week. Look that up historically, because these teams I don't think really ever had a rivalry. You know, because they've never been in the same division, obviously. But I just like, you know, Twins teams from the mid to late '60s was good. They got to a World Series. They got to the playoffs. You know, those first couple of years when they went to division play with Tony Oliva, Rod Carew, and Harmon Killebrew. I mean, Jim Cott, Mudcat Grant. They always had good teams, and I wonder if they just always struggled against the Yankees. It's just really, really odd. Um, I think that the Yankees have to get healthy. I think that they have to stave off now the hard charging Tampa Bay Rays, whose uniforms are brutal, by the way. I'm sorry. And I like the color, but the star on there is just it's just odd. It's an odd combination. But um and we were talking about this, texting about this over the weekend. They're such an odd team. You know, because
Yeah.
I wanted to tune in when I could, some of those games over the weekend because they all of a sudden became big games, and I'm like, I don't know hardly any of these play. You know, some of their starters. I know obviously they've got the big star at shortstop and a Rosarina. Um, but there were several players. I'm like, who are these guys? But their pitchers, I never know who their pitchers are. I'm like, who are these guys? And what was that game where it was like 2-1 or 2-0? And they had already used 5 pitchers. I think they wound up using 6 pitchers. This guy Kevin Cash, the thing is, I can't argue with it because every year they get in, they somehow either make a run or they get into the playoffs, or like a few years ago, they got to the World Series. So what they're doing works, but they are just a very odd team, and it's not like other teams have followed suit. I want to use a really, really quick example. One of the first teams, and this was a Luis Garcia thing from the last couple of years. One of the first teams to play their outfielders a little bit more in the gaps instead of down the line was the Mets. And now I'm noticing, if you notice, there's less and less doubles up the gaps. Almost every team is doing that now. They play their outfield because I guess there was some sort of statistics that showed there's very few, doubles down the line now. That used to be very common, right? You had a double into the corner. We talked about this a few weeks back, less and less triples now because, and part of that, as our friend Larry pointed out, he was right. A lot of players don't bust it out of the box right away is also a big thing on the triples. But so here's the thing: whenever there's stuff like that, and I don't remember the first teams that started doing these crazy infield shifts.
The Rays.
It was the Rays, probably, right?
Rays and Astros.
Yeah, it was. So a lot of teams followed that, but in terms of what they do with their pitching, nobody does that. They're the only team that does that, and maybe that's how they bring them up through the minor leagues, because every once in a while they'll have a guy like Corey Kluber, right? Started the other day. They'll get a guy on the cheap that's from another team, and he still has stuff in the tank like a Corey Kluber. But for the most part, these are guys coming from their minor leagues that it's just an interesting team. But anyway, I think your Yankees are going to be okay. I do, but they've got to get healthy. They can't put a lineup like this out in October. I don't think they will. I think they'll have guys that'll be back. But it's not a bad thing to have a Miguel Andujar who has stuff to prove in there. You know what I mean? So some of these guys I think have a lot to prove, and Kiner Falefa showing that relationship to Ralph Kiner. Now he's hitting the pout for power, right?
Yeah, that's his John Sterling call. He's Ralph Kiner Falefa, Isaiah the player.
It is amazing, and it's amazing that he's like a distant cousin, but he always missed him. You never met him. It's amazing story. The star on the Pirates. Did you know this? And you hate to see these guys come up with a team like the Pirates because 10 years from now he's not going to be with the Pirates.
Yeah.
But O'Neill, do you know that he was named after Paul O'Neill? His first name's O'Neill. Paul O'Neill was his dad's favorite player.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
They said that. Gary Cohen said that in the Mets series. So let's do 2 seconds on the Mets. Obviously, Mike Clark, we know he's listening. He's happy with his Braves. The Braves just don't lose, man. They won again yesterday. I don't remember a team this hot. They definitely have the heart of a champion. I mean, they've been hot since June? Remember they started off bad. But they had just and was it you that sent me this? The Mets were like 17, 18 games over 500 in period of time, I think from August 1st. I mean, the Mets have still played. Go ahead.
Since June 1st, the Mets are 17 games over 500, fourth best record in the National League, and still have lost 10.5 games to the Braves.
It's amazing. I don't know that the Mets are going to stave this team off. It'd be nice to have that bye, but it's going to be with the Braves pitching now on all cylinders. It's going to be hard to stave this team off, and the Mets obviously with Scherzer going now on the IL. That's a tough loss, but they do have Tyler McGill coming back, which is going to be a good. He was pitching great before he got hurt, so I think they'll start to get some depth back there. Their bullpen was hurting these last few days. I mean, they got spanked by, the Nats, and then by the Pirates. They lost 3 in a row, And but at least they kind of righted the ship yesterday, so we'll see what happens. But the next man up mentality, we know our buddy Trevor listens as well to the show, and his favorite player, Tyler McGill, came up with a big 3-run homer yesterday because Starling Marte got hit with a pitch, and they don't know if he's got some loose bones in his knuckles there. Hopefully that's not the
Oof.
case. We should hear that today, but it's got to be the next man up mentality, and McGill, Naquin came through. What did I say? I said McGill, right? Tyler
Yeah.
Naquin came through. So, and I know that's his favorite player. Go ahead.
Um, I think your Mets are going to be fine.
Yeah.
Because I look at it and I'm just going to read this off very, very quickly here. So the Braves, their remaining schedule: Mariners, Giants, Phillies, Nats, Mets, and then Marlins. The Mets have a much easier schedule. Let's see here. The Mets, obviously they played the Pirates, and then Marlins, Cubs, Pirates, Brewers, A's, Marlins, Brave, or not, did I say Braves? A's, Marlins, Braves, and then Nats. So really, to me, like, first of all, that second to last series of the year, which would have ended the year if there wasn't a lockout, just pointing that out. How amazing would that be? Finish off the year with the Braves. But not only is that going to be a huge series, obviously, but it seems like the Mets have a much easier schedule. Like, they don't have to play the Mariners. They don't have to play the Brewers, who are fighting for their playoff
Yeah.
lives. They don't have to play
Yeah.
the Phillies again. So I think they're probably going to be fine.
Yeah.
But either way, I think it's probably going to come down to that weekend series.
I think so. Yeah, I know. And I would be celebrating that had the Nats not been doing conga lines in the dugout this weekend, because they were just slapping the Mets around. I mean, and but we see this every September, don't we, in baseball, where these teams that have had these awful years, this makes their year when they can play spoiler like that. And the Pirates also was celebrating big time when they spanked them on Monday night. So I don't know. I think we're gonna be okay. I do. And that series is in Atlanta, right? The last 3 games,
Let me double check.
which I mean, the Mets have played well there. It's not like the House of Horrors that was Turner Field, for all those years. So, but that's going to be must see TV, right? And those games will probably be nationally televised. I would imagine. It comes down to it, because I mean, there might be other races. I mean, the Brewers, you mentioned them; they're all of a sudden 4 games out of the wild card. So that's going to be kind of the only other drama in the National League, and the American League. I think there's going to be some drama going down towards the end, but go ahead. They were in Atlanta, right, for that last series?
Yep, they're in Atlanta.
Okay. All right. I thought so. All right. Going to be fun. Let's switch gears, because almost a little bit after we had uploaded our show, you sent me the message that Donovan Mitchell was traded to, ironically enough, the Cleveland Cavaliers, where you're sitting there in Cleveland, which kind of came out of nowhere for me. I didn't even know that they were interested in Donovan Mitchell. I thought they would just continue to build their core. So I'm going to keep quiet. I want to hear your thoughts, because you've got obviously thoughts on the Knicks losing out on him, but you also have heard all the sports talk there in Cleveland. So fire away. What's been the reaction there, and how do you feel about this trade?
Well, I'll start out from the Knicks' perspective in saying that, yes, I am disappointed that they couldn't pull it off, especially seeing what they ended up giving up. I feel like the Knicks probably could have given up that package and we would have been fine with it. But it also seems like they wouldn't, because the Knicks wanted Donovan Mitchell so badly
Yeah.
that Danny Ainge wasn't going to do that type of package with the Knicks. He was going to ask for Obi Toppin. He's going to ask for Quentin Grimes, IQ, RJ Barrett, 8 first-round picks, and maybe the keys to Jim Dolan, or to Dolan's car. I don't know. But I think that it's I think because we had talked about, like, would we have given up RJ Barrett straight up? Like, I think overall, you look at the trade, the Knicks probably could have made it happen, but also sometimes like the best trades are the ones that you don't make. Um, I'm trying to look at this kind of from the bright side that the Knicks kind of continue to retain their core. And like, let's say a guy like Quentin Grimes becomes a star, and you've got RJ Barrett, you got Jalen Brunson, you got Julius Randle. Like maybe you've got something kind of brewing. Um, the biggest thing, and I'd sent you, I think it was on Facebook. This, like, okay, you've kept the core now. You have to play them. I don't want to be seeing Taj Gibson getting 30 minutes while Obi Toppin's getting garbage time in the fourth quarter.
Right, right,
I don't
right.
want to be seeing like Derrick Rose is great, and I think he kind of adds that spark, but he shouldn't be playing more than Emmanuel Quickly. Like at
Yeah,
this point, you got to develop the core. And I know that's kind of against what Thibodeau kind of does, it seems like, where he really likes to lean more on the veterans. But in order to justify not making this trade, you have to play your young guys.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
like, kind of moving forward, obviously, we're still a few weeks away from the NBA really getting started. But, like, you got to play the young guys this year. You
yeah.
got to give Obi Toppin a chance to do what he did at the end of last year. Didn't he finish off with a triple double last year?
He
Or
did.
close one of the last few games. So I think that's one of the big things. Looking at it from the Cleveland perspective, a lot of people are very, very excited about it. Um, and I think kind of in the same way. Because I had seen a few weeks ago that they told the Jazz like, hey, we'd be interested in Donovan Mitchell, but we're not giving up our top stars. Our Evan Mobley's, our Jared Allen's, Darius Garland. So like it kind of seemed like, oh well, basically they're saying they're not going to get him. Um, but then obviously the trade happened, and it's interesting because like one of those things that was kind of lingering out there in like the Cavs world is what are you doing with Colin Sexton?
Mm,
Um, because like he had been a great player. Like he was kind of the first in this new line of really good draft picks. Like you look at the Cavs the
yeah,
last few years,
no doubt. Great point.
they've hit on
Yeah,
their draft picks.
yeah,
Um, and so he became the restricted free agent. No one also, this is kind of weird. And I would have said, why didn't the Knicks try to go after him? No one really went after him with restricted free agency at all, which I
yeah,
think was kind of interesting. But
yeah,
they ended up pulling off the sign and trade with him. I do have a guy that works at the Learning Center or did work at the Learning Center. He's I believe he's going into senior year of high school. I texted him afterwards. Colin Sexton is his favorite player, so
yeah,
he's really upset because
yeah.
of that.
Stay up
But
late at night watching Utah Jazz games now.
yep,
You know?
but yeah, they're excited. I think you look at this team 1 through 5, they might have one of the best starting lineups in the NBA. Definitely in the Eastern Conference when you look at like the starting 5 overall. Because you look at a
Mhm.
team like Brooklyn, yes, you have a Kevin Durant and a Kyrie Irving, but like there's always going to be like that small gap of like, oh, well, that's a random guy that wouldn't start on most teams.
Mhm.
Philadelphia would be the same way, Miami.
Right.
But you look at the Cavs starting 5, that's a really good starting 5.
Yeah,
And I don't know. I don't know if it makes them like title contenders overnight, but we'll see kind of how it happens.
yeah,
It also maybe seems like because I feel like if Donovan Mitchell did come to the Knicks, there'd be an immense amount of pressure for the Knicks to win. I don't think that's going to be the case with the Cavs. And also, he doesn't have to share all of the spotlight. Like everyone loves all of the young players here. Whether you're talking Evan Mobley, who kind of seems like probably the main guy. Also, Jared Allen's kind of in there. Like so, I think that's probably good for him, where he's kind of joining a group that's like developing. So he's
yeah.
not going to be the star. If he was in the Knicks, he would be the star. And anytime he has a bad game, just like with Julius Randle, he'd hear those boo birds like crazy. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's a scary young team. I think you're dead on in everything you said. Memory serves me right. I'm gonna go back to Colin Sexton for a second. Didn't he, when he got drafted, call out LeBron James when he got drafted the year when LeBron went to the Lakers? And didn't he say, "Hey, I'm the reason that you should stay here"? Didn't he tweet like that out? You know, you and I together, we could do some special things.
oh,
And
I think so.
Yeah, he came out of Alabama, if I remember right. Um,
Yeah.
he's a very good player, but you're basically saying, and I think that's what the feeling back here is that Danny Ainge, who never liked the Knicks, obviously, and it's interesting, by the way, that he's. I'm going to talk about BYU in a little bit because that's where he went. He was a star in college at BYU. Interesting, he's wound up back in Utah, but I think that real quick on the Knicks, you're dead on. I jotted this down as you were talking because I think that the front office is probably has the same philosophy as you. There's no way I could think that when these moves happen, I said there's no way this is a Thibodeau move, right? Because when the Knicks got rid of Nerlens Noel's and Alec Burks, how much did Alec Burks play the last couple of years? And he's a veteran guy, right? He played a lot. Remember at some point he was starting last year and no knock on him. He served well. He didn't have as good a year this past year as he did the year before, but he played a lot. So he blocked some minutes from a lot of these guys. And so I'm really thinking that that was probably a front office thing. And probably that was a compromise because I would think the front office was probably also saying as much as he still means to this team, front office was probably saying we need to consider getting rid of Derrick Rose as well so that quickly can play. And probably Thibodeau drew a line in the sand because Taj Gibson is not back, with the team either. And so I think that the front office has the same philosophy as you. Listen, I think the Knicks might now fly under the radar a little bit. I think it's a good team. It's certainly not a great team, but I think if RJ continues to improve the way he did last year, if Randall bounces back, it's apparent Randall's going to be on the team. If he bounces back, um, and you add a guy like Brunson, and Brunson plays like he did, and he continues to improve. A lot of people, forget. I mean, he's still pretty young as well. Do you have the big three? Of course not, but you've got a good solid three, here to build around. And Mitchell Robinson, if he's healthy and if he's in shape. I mean, listen, we're a couple of weeks away from obviously previewing the NBA, but the Cavs, I think you're right on a lot of things, but a couple of things that stand out is how you said that sometimes it's the trades that we don't make, and I, I wouldn't have traded RJ straight up for Mitchell as much as I wanted him on the team. I wanted him on the team with RJ, and then we got something. And but I do think there was something there with Danny Ainge, and trained him to the Knicks. I mean, he was holding the Knicks hostage, so. Um, yeah, old rivalries, man, never die. Knicks Celtics. I mean, come on, jeez. All right, we'll close that out. Ready to talk about some football because tonight is Rams and Bills, which is a great matchup, right?
Oh
To
yeah.
to start the year. And so, how about we talk about our teams real quick first, and then we'll give our picks. Um, I'll spend a couple of minutes here on the Jets because I have to say, for the first time in probably 5, 6, maybe even 7 years, I'm really optimistic. I don't think that the Jets are a playoff team yet. I think they could get to 8. It's not 8-8 anymore, right? So you can't finish at 500 anymore, right? So they
Yeah.
can finish at either 8-9 or 9-8. I think that the Jets though are going to be a lot more fun to watch this year because they have some playmakers. I'm really excited about Sauce Gardner and to see what he brings to the table. Uh, uh, you know, and I have to, you texted me yesterday that Joe Flacco is starting. He's probably starting the first 4 games or so. It's going to be interesting to see if he still has something in the tank. He didn't so much last year, the game or two that he started last year. But I'm so not sold yet on Zach Wilson. I mean, let him get healthy. But here's the thing. He's gonna have to really step up because this is the first time in a while the Jets have really good receivers. And they've got guys that can make some plays. Remember, I kept saying every time the Jets got people that could make some plays, they traded them away or got rid of them. Now, if they hold on to some of these guys, and I look at the defense was good last year. And so CJ Mosley is a budding star. And then you've added a couple of pieces in here, and you've got a defensive minded head coach. So I only see the defense getting better this year. And now, if trouble was last year, they just couldn't score any points. But now this year, if Flacco gets off to a good start, and you know, by a lot of quarterback standards, he's not crazy old, right? You know, and he has won before. Trouble is he hasn't won since he left Baltimore, though, which is a little bit troubling. But I think that I could see the Jets at 8-9 or 9-8 even. I don't think it's a playoff team just yet. I think this will be a good year to build on, but I think it'll be a watchable team. You know, I hate to admit this because I never do this with the Mets. I never do this with the Knicks. But there were times last year where I flipped away from the Jets, man. It was just like unwatchable. Some of these, when they're always on at 1 o'clock, you know, them and the Giants, and that's going to be this year too. I don't think they have, unless they're playing in the West Coast. I don't think they have any 4 o'clock games. You know, for the most part, they're the early games, you know, on. But I just there were times where I'm like, okay, you know, there's some other games that are starting to percolate here, you know, that 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock hour. And, you know, I'm like, gosh, it's 24-0, and the Jets are going nowhere in this game. So I turned, and I never do that with the Knicks or with the Mets. But but I think they'll be watchable. I think they'll be exciting, you know, this year. And so I'm looking forward to it. So what do you got with the Giants?
Well, I'll start out with this. The Giants' strength of schedule, it's very easy this year compared to based on
Mhm.
records from last year. They have the 29th hardest or the fourth easiest schedule. And ironically, the bottom four when it comes to strength and schedule, the Giants, the Eagles, the Cowboys, and the Commanders.
Mm,
All
wow.
the
All,
NFC
all
East
in the East. Wow.
because they have probably I think it's because they all have horrible records anyway and they play each other a billion times. So anyway, um I think this is going to be a year of improvement for the Giants. Um I'm hoping that they can avoid having a top 10 draft pick again. And I think they will. They do have some playmakers on the defense now. Think that Thibodeau is going to be out for the first few weeks. But I think it's a really big, like, this is a huge prove it year for a lot of guys, namely Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. Um, I think Daniel Jones will be fine. I have to look this up, but I saw a thing where he has very similar numbers to one guy named Josh Allen in his first 4 years. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be Josh Allen. I know that we are still talking about a guy that, like, I know they're like similar build and all, but
Yeah.
like to say, oh well, he's the next Josh Allen to me might be a little premature.
But you know, let me just stop you there for 1 second. The physical, because you just mentioned that the physical tools are very, very similar. And I do think that he's got a big arm. I think that he's got the same physical tools as Josh Allen. And so why can't he be Josh Allen? I don't know. I mean, I don't have the answer to that. Neither do the coaches that have been fired, that have come and gone. But yeah, it's a great comparison.
Yeah. All right. So I found the stat here. So first 38 career games, Daniel Jones versus Josh Allen. The record is definitely off. So Daniel Jones 12-25, Josh Allen 23-15. Much better. Completion percentage, Daniel Jones 63, Josh Allen 60. Passing and rushing yards per game, Daniel Jones 247, Josh Allen 249. Touchdown to interceptions, 45-29 for Daniel Jones, Josh Allen 51-28. It's a
Wow,
little
so
bit more on the
close.
touchdowns, but they're pretty
Yeah,
close.
very
Um,
close.
so we'll see. And
Yeah.
also, they both have a very offensive minded guy helping them in Dayball. So we'll see. Like I said, I'm not expecting Daniel Jones to light up the world, but I would say if he gets some decent growth this year, they also have a better offensive line than they've had in years past. Hopefully that means that they can take a step forward. Now, do I think they're going to be like because there's always at least that one team that goes from worst to first. I believe it's happened every year, at least one team that was in last place the year before makes the
Yeah.
playoffs.
Yeah.
I don't think the Giants are that team, but I do think that they can make a couple strides forward.
Yeah.
Because also their division is a little tougher. Jalen Hurts has another year under him. The Cowboys are kind of scarily being under the radar a little bit. And we'll see what Washington can do under what's his face, Carson Wentz.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think their division isn't going to be like everyone's just awful this year, but I think they can kind of take that step forward. Um, I think they have like 5 touchdowns by their wide receiving core. I'm expecting that not to happen next year or this year.
Crazy stat. Wow, that was awful. Yeah.
Um, Kenny Galladay had as many touchdowns as you and I did for the Giants,
Which is
and he
hard to
got paid
believe.
$72 million to do that. So, well, I guess
That-
not fully 72, but
yeah, that's still hard to believe. Because he should be the star, one of the stars of that team, no doubt.
yeah. But yeah, I think this will be a year of improvement. I if I'm giving like a number, I would say somewhere in like the 6-11, 7-10 range. So
Okay.
not horrible, but
Okay.
still below 500, probably in like the 11, 13 type of range for drafts. So
Okay. Okay. But improvement, be in games, show some excitement. Again, I've always told you this: the Giant fans are different breed. They're older. The tickets are passed on. It's generational with the Giants. Tickets are passed on and passed on. These last couple of years where they've been booed and sometimes booed out of the stadium has been eye-opening, and the Maras, again, they've owned the team forever. They are definitely aware of that. So if Jones does not play well and he's getting booed, and they'll put that pressure on that. There needs to be another quarterback in here next year. Obviously, the coach and the GM will be safe. But that Giant franchise is such an interesting. Them and the Steelers, the Packers. It's still just a few. Around the NFL that kind of really operate in the old school, which isn't bad. Not a bad thing. But they're also, when you look at the fan bases, on these new stadiums that have been built, it's the same generation year in, year out that have attended those games, and they spend a lot of money. So I think that's with the Giants more than most teams. That is always a factor. What the fans think and feel, because the Maras really listen, a lot to the fans.
yeah.
All right. All right, so we both are optimistic, which is interesting. So, all right, I'll jump in with my picks real quick, because I did pick the Rams last year. I'll just give a very, very quick background. I think when you look at the AFC, there are 2 teams that I think are going to be really, really interesting to watch, that are going to be must-see TV almost every week. And that would be the Raiders. I think the Raiders are ultra improved. I'm really anxious to see how their coach does now. Second time around, getting a head coach. He was an absolute disaster his first time around. Then he went back to New England and learned under the master, for several more years. And now he's certainly much older. It's going to be interesting to see what he does with that team that is got a lot of talent. They made some really good moves in the offseason. I'm not sure their quarterback is the answer long term, but and nonetheless, it's going to be interesting to see that offense. It'll be interesting to see that Las Vegas crowd, get behind them in that new stadium. So I'm really interested to see how the Raiders do. I think they're going to be one of the contenders in the AFC. But your team sitting right there is must-see TV every week. I think the Browns. And I think it'll be quiet now. I think now that, Baker's gone and the Deshaun thing is settled, I think now they can just focus on football, and they've got a heck of a team. So I think they'll be must-see TV. However, I went with last year's model in terms of who I picked to go to the Super Bowl. It's going to take a lot of things falling into place, but I there was one reason why I picked the Rams last year. That was Matthew Stafford. I thought that a veteran guy getting a shot, now to go to a team that was really talented, great coaching, that it would fall into place for him, and it did. So I'm gonna go up to the Mile High City here and say that the Denver Broncos will get to the Super Bowl from the AFC. And and listen, two words, Russell Wilson. Here's the difference with him and Stafford. Russell Wilson, while Stafford, I'm not saying he wasn't a winner, he never did really win in Detroit. Stafford has, and Stafford has not Stafford, Wilson has, and Wilson has proven that he's a champion. He can get a team to a Super Bowl, and he's a leader. He's been a great leader. He never really barked out there in Seattle saying, "Hey, you got to trade me" or whatever. Getting this start in Denver, and Denver's been on the cusp these last 3-4 years of being a good team. That piece has been missing, and I think now you throw Russell Wilson on that team. I think you're gonna have something right from week one, and it'll be interesting to see how they come out Monday night, against Seattle. That's just ironic how they're scheduled to start against Seattle. So my pick in the AFC is the Denver Broncos. Um, so I'll go NFC real quick and then I'll turn the floor over to you. I also think there's a team in the NFC that is now past all of the controversy, all the noise, and I think there's one last hurrah in this quarterback. While I think that he's been stripped of a few of his weapons, I think he's got a lot to prove. Uh, Even though he was a little controversial a week or two ago, I'm talking about Aaron Rodgers. I think that, in his legacy, if he walks away with just one title, there are going to be a lot of people that say, how can you call this guy the greatest of all time? And I don't know why people do that anyway. It's clearly Tom Brady, but,
Yeah.
but I do think the Packers have something to prove. I think they're past a lot of the stuff that's plagued them the last few years. And I think their clarity is going to be just on the field, this year, unless something silly happens off the field. But I think Rodgers will take that team to the Super Bowl this year. I really do. They've come close in the playoffs the last few years. There seems to always be a cloud over that team for some reason. I don't see it this year. And so my Super Bowl picks are Denver at Green Bay. And listen, there are, I think, three other contenders in the NFC. Obviously, the defending champs, Rams. If Odell ever decides to come back, that'll really make them really good if they bring him back. Obviously, Tampa is going to be right there, and none of us would be surprised if they got to the Super Bowl again. But I think Dallas is actually a very good team. The nobody know people it's that's a team that runs the gamut. Either you have people that love the Cowboys or you have people that hate the Cowboys. I've never fell in either camp. I've never really cared about them. I could never figure out why so many New Yorkers like the Dallas Cowboys. But they've got a really good team, and I do think that they also have kind of passed some of the controversy and stuff like that they've had over the last few years. So Denver Broncos, Green Bay Packers. I think the Packers will win the Super Bowl this year, but I think it'll be those two teams in the Super Bowl. Those are my picks. It's on tape.
All righty. Well, you saying let's ride with the Broncos. I don't know if you've seen that from Russell Wilson. Let's ride.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I'll start with the AFC. I feel like the AFC is so hard to predict because you look at it and there's probably about like 7 or 8 teams where you're like, oh, well, I wouldn't be that surprised if they made it. So let's say like Kansas City or Cincinnati again or Baltimore.
Yeah.
You had mentioned Vegas. Like the Chargers are also up there. They've improved a lot.
Yeah.
But I think this will be a team that kind of has a chip on their shoulder a little bit. A team that had probably one of the more devastating losses that in most recent history. And also as a result, they've changed the rules because of it. And that's the Buffalo Bills. Yeah. I think having Josh Allen kind of, I wouldn't say like a huge chip on his shoulder because I feel like that's kind of overused a little bit, but like now you're talking twice in the last few years that he's lost to Patrick Mahomes. And obviously last year, like you have 13 seconds with the lead and you can't hold it. Like, I think that's one of those big issues that might, if he doesn't get over it quickly, it's definitely going to linger. And we talked about people having, like teams having a number on them. it's going to start looking like Mahomes has Josh Allen's number if once again in the playoffs they don't make it happen.
Yeah.
Adding Von Miller, I know Von Miller's not the Von Miller of a few years ago, but he's
Yeah.
still a very good player.
Good.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think that'll be a huge addition. Not to mention the fact that not only will he help the defense like on the field, but I think off the field, he's one of those great guys to have in your locker room that's really been a huge help.
The
So
champions. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm going with the Bills. I think that they'll finally conquer the Chiefs and the the amazing stuff that happens in Kansas City every year.
Yeah.
So I'm picking them. NFC to me is just like I feel like there's a lot of bad teams in the NFC. I mean, you look at the West where you have the Rams, the Cardinals, um, the 49ers, and I mean obviously the Seahawks aren't going to do much with whoever they're starting at quarterback because they starting Geno Smith. I think I saw that. Um, I forgot
Uh,
who they're starting. I think it's Geno Smith, but I could be wrong.
yeah. Uh,
Either way, like they're not going to do much.
no.
You have the North, you got the Packers, the Vikings might make a little bit of noise there. South, I mean it's the Bucks and really nobody else. I mean the Panthers might sneak in. Maybe Baker Mayfield plays pretty well, but like, do you believe in the Saints without Sean Payton, without Drew Brees? Not really. Um, Even like I mentioned, the NFC East will be better, but like I'm not fully sold on the Cowboys. I agree that I feel like the Cowboys are a very scary team, and it's one of those teams that no one's talking about, but I'm surprised that no one's talking about them.
Yeah.
I
Me
mean,
too.
make them like 3-0, 4-0, that's probably going to change,
Yeah.
um but also Philly's going to be better. Washington's probably going to be better. The Giants might be better. But
Yeah.
I think overall like you look at like the top quarterbacks in the NFC, there really isn't that many. And I think when it comes down to it, you're going to see the defending champs back in the Super Bowl. Um, Somehow they always have like amazing weapons. Somehow, despite like the fact that there's a salary cap, they sign. It seems like everybody.
Yeah.
And like you said, if Odell comes back, like they have a very strong wide receiving core. They have probably the best defensive lineman in football, and Aaron Donald. They have the best secondary guy in Jalen Ramsey. Um, Matt Stafford, he says that he's feeling great entering the season. I feel like everybody says that, but still, like, I mean, he's probably feeling pretty good. So I don't know. I can't really see the Rams like once you kind of hit that Super Bowl and you kind of make it either push and they'll be like 11-0 or they're going to have like a really rough start to the season. I
Yeah.
think that we're going to see a bookend of this season where we start out with the Rams and the Bills and we finish
Wow.
out with the Rams and the Bills.
Wow. All right. That's a great pick. So you've got Bills, Rams. I've got Broncos and Green Bay. Interesting. We didn't mention, I jotted this down as you were talking. We didn't mention Tennessee. And there's this, so you were right. AFC, so many good teams, with Cincy and, we also didn't mention New England. I don't think they're going to be that good, but you never know. They could surprise you. Miami, we didn't mention at all either. I think they'll be improved, but because they finished strong last year. But all right, I think this is good. So we got it on tape. We got Denver, Green Bay, and we've got Buffalo and LA in the Super Bowl. So we'll follow along and see what happens. I think this is going to be a great season. I think, as you mentioned, there's a lot of really, really good teams. There's a lot of teams I think also that's going to be not so good. So all right. We're gonna have a lot to talk about obviously next week. As this week one, some great matchups in this week one as we starting with tonight. And it'll be interesting to see. Let me ask you this last question about football. This is I don't remember a time in our lifetime where all of these great top announcers switched channels. I was surprised at this. Let me start with this question. I was surprised that the Manning cast is still going to be on with them spending this much money on Joe Buck and Troy Aikman for Monday Night Football, because that is going to take people off. As much as I like Aikman and Buck, there's going to be some Monday nights if I'm up that I gotta watch Peyton and Eli. I mean, they're just so good at what they do. Were you surprised that that's still on?
No, because like, and baseball has tried this with because
Uh,
I still like K Rod Cast isn't doing it for me.
no.
Um, the also the Yes Network, they have the guys that I listen to, John Boy and Jake on Talking Yanks.
Uh-huh.
They've done a couple of like, I don't know what they call it, but like a Manning cast type of thing. That
Really?
one
Okay.
hasn't been bad either.
Okay.
Um, but like the Manning cast is just so good. And
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people too that don't necessarily like Joe Buck. Like there's a lot of people I know that are like, oh, Joe Bucks is the worst. So I think when they're on, it's gonna be fully them. Um, but also I think what I love the most about the Manning cast is like Peyton Manning and like, well, both of them, but mainly Peyton kind of doing like the X's and O's of football.
Yeah.
Like you could tell how good of a quarterback he was just by the way he's like, okay, so it looks like they're lining up here. If I'm doing this, I'm saying we're shifting in this way. I'm
Yeah.
audibling out of this because this is what's going to happen. And most of the time it happens. He's better than Tony Romo in that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it is interesting because it's going to be like, I'm so used to hearing Joe Buck on Fox. It's going to be really weird hearing him on ESPN and a Troy Aikman for that matter.
Yeah.
Kind of seeing this like full blown shift because like you said, I don't remember a time where it's been this
No.
dramatic.
These guys never
Um,
left. You know, these guys back in the day, they never left. You know, Pat Summerall and John Madden, you know, they stayed together. They only went to Fox when Fox first got football, you know. Um, yeah, it's quite a shift. Um,
um, and also Al Michaels is
yeah.
Amazon now, right?
Well, I was going to ask you about that. So Al Michaels and Kurt Herbstreit, um, which is interesting that Herbstreit is still going to do the top college game of the week as well as Thursday Night Football. I don't know how he's going to pull that off. He's a sharp guy. I mean, he's always been a very good analyst. So Al Michaels, Kurt Herbstreit, you intrigued about that on Amazon Thursday nights?
That is interesting. I'm intrigued. It'll be interesting to kind of see how like things kind of shift because also with a lot of like a little bit of these shifts, like Joe Buck usually doesn't call a Kansas City Chiefs game because he's done a lot of the NFC.
Yeah.
I feel like Troy Aikman is like obligated to do every single Cowboys game. Um, but like seeing them kind of do some NFC or AFC games will be interesting. Um, Al Michaels has kind of done a lot of them,
Yeah.
but also tonight it's not going to be Amazon; it's on NBC.
On NBC. Yeah.
So
That's a change too. You have Mike Tirico now full time with Chris Collinsworth and not Drew Brees, which was, you know, he was the heir apparent, but that didn't seem to work out. Brees is still on the pregame show. I think that's interesting because, you know, Brees has been also on the Notre Dame games on NBC. And, you know, people, they've been very critical of him. I think he's pretty good, but Collinsworth is he's always been one of the best. I mean, his analyst is always right on. And he's also got a very distinctive voice too, you know.
well,
Um,
here's a guy that
yeah, exactly. Exactly. He still has a little southern twang to himself. On Fox, I think they've taken a more low key approach. I mean, because you've got Kevin Burkhardt, who's like, it's crazy. Just 7, 8 years ago, he was like the sideline reporter for the Mets, and now he's, you know, well deserved. I mean, he's really, really good at what he does. And Greg Olson, you know, and only now his second year, right, as a full time analyst, but I remember when they would have the bye weeks, he would always, you know, spend that week, you know, in the booth on Fox. So and obviously they're keeping that seat warm for Tom Brady. Thoughts real quick on Kevin Burkhardt and they're doing the Super Bowl. Kevin Burkhardt and Greg Olson.
oh, that's interesting. I've always liked Kevin Burkhardt.
Yeah.
I always thought it was annoying when they would have him on the pregame for baseball. I always thought he should be more in the booth than he was.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I like it. I think it's a good switch. Like I'm not sold yet on the baseball aspect of it with Joe. To me, Joe Davis is kind of a little bit of a generic voice,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
Yeah.
I won't mind if he's calling
Yeah.
the Yankees winning the World Series. So
Well, I'll tell you what I like about Joe Davis and Kevin Burkhardt. It's about the game. It's not about them. They're very, you
yeah,
know, they just call the game where, some of these guys that are big stars, and I like Joe Buck. I mean, I always did. I always thought he was a good announcer. But there's a lot. It's funny. There's a lot of people that aren't crazy about him. By the way, Burkhardt is going to be doing baseball and football at the same time. He mentioned that because the Mets had him on in the booth the other day, and they were interviewing him for a couple of innings, and he said he's going to be really, really busy. He's going to do, the playoff as well as World Series pregame shows, and then hop on a plane and do the top NFL game, sort of like Joe Buck. But at least he's not in the booth; he's doing the pregames and postgame shows. So, all right, hey, let's jump to our inspiration as we're winding down here. I'm going to be really quick because I was going to read this word for word, but I think what I'll do is just kind of sum this up. And here's my inspiration. We've got to continue to have conversations, whether we agree or disagree. And here's going to be my point. A few weeks ago, there was a player on the Duke University volleyball team. Now, volleyball is not a sport we talk about or we follow, but this became a big deal because they were playing BYU, Brigham Young University, which is a Mormon, university, right? And I only say that because we're supposed to be under an umbrella, right? Of at least religion, But in the stands, the Duke University team has one black player, and every time she was touching the ball, there were people in the stands yelling out the N-word and calling her the N-word. And that was bad enough, except that she felt, and then the rest of the Duke team felt like the officials at BYU didn't react fast enough and eject some of these fans. And the coaches for BYU didn't do anything at that moment, like didn't pull their players off and say, wait, let's get these fans out of here, or something like that. And that actually never did happen. And it took them a long time to eject these fans. Terrible incident, right?
Yeah.
You remember a few years ago, the All-Star game being moved out of Atlanta. And I thought that was a bad move because while it was all around voting rights, which is, there should be conversations around that. And I thought that the players would carry some sort of voice, and that maybe if the All-Star game was in Atlanta, and it made it worse that Hank Aaron had passed away that year, a few months before. If there had been more conversations, the All-Star game had been there could have been a forum to have more conversations. So here's my point. A little bit after this, and this is big in women's college basketball, South Carolina, who's always a great team, opening night, nationally televised, because apparently BYU's women's team basketball is supposed to be really good, highly ranked as well. They were scheduled to play each other. Opening night, nationally televised game, and Dawn Staley, who is Deuce Staley's sister, by the way, is the head coach at South Carolina. She pulled out of the game as a protest to BYU and saying, hey, we're not going to go there. You guys didn't do enough about it. And part of that is correct. But here's my point. If you go and play, right, you can have time before or after the game to have conversations about it. Why hurt these players who are looking forward to being on this nationally televised opening night game, and there could be some reconciliation there, right? Now, the basketball teams have nothing to do with this. And, these are a few fans. Again, what they did was reprehensible, but now we make it a little bit more worse by not talking about it and just bailing out. And now, hey, we're not going to have any comment. We're just not, that's our protest. We're not going there. So my hope and inspiration is that when there's stuff like this, especially along racial lines, let's have conversations. How can we ever solve these things if we never talk about it? And I think it would have been more powerful for South Carolina to go there and play BYU and have have the two coaches have a forum about it beforehand on race relations and how it can get better. Anyway, that's my quick inspiration for today. What do you got?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I think because I think there is a time and a place for protests.
Yes.
But if that's our automatic, then we're not trying to build up anything, because people are always just talking about the protests as opposed to why are we protesting to start with?
Yes.
So I think that's really important.
It is.
Um,
Absolutely.
Today I want to talk about a team that like I feel like hasn't gotten a lot of love this baseball season, and they should. Um, to put it in perspective, the team I'm talking about is the Seattle Mariners. The last time they made the playoffs was right in the wake of 9/11, which Sunday
Wow.
will be the 21st anniversary of that.
Yeah.
Um, the year that they last made the playoffs, this young rookie also won MVP. His name is Ichiro Suzuki, who was just inducted into the Mariners Hall of Fame. Um, and also, I don't know how close he is. It's probably a couple years because I don't think he's on the ballot this year.
Yeah.
But like, this is a guy, this is a team that like they've been bad for a long time. Also, 2001, they set the American League record for wins, and obviously it didn't work out for them in the end.
Yeah.
So it's a team that hasn't made the playoffs in forever. Um, I don't know if you remember this before the season last year. There was a lot of controversy surrounding their CEO and part owner.
Yes.
With a lot of like racially charged stuff that he said towards his Hispanic and Japanese born players.
I remember.
A lot of sexual assault thingies.
Yeah.
And then there was all of the bigger issues surrounding like service time manipulation and things like that. And here they are. On September 8th, they had a 99% chance of making the playoffs.
Wow.
It would be quite the collapse because right now, the top 3 wildcard teams, you have Tampa Bay, you have Seattle, and Toronto. The next team that's closest to them, another team that's been getting a lot of love because they've been so surprising, is Baltimore. But they're 4.5 games out. They might make it, they might not. Fun fact also, Baltimore, if they were in the AL Central, would be leading the AL Central. They're in 4th place in the East.
They've been amazing. They've been amazing. Yeah.
But like Seattle, I think you can look at a lot of different aspects of Seattle, whether it's the improved starting pitching, whether it's making a couple of really key trades. But one that I'm going to point out is the young stud Julio Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Who recently just signed a massive extension that could be worth the most money ever in baseball if he gets all of the incentives and whatnot.
Yeah.
He is actually, I think, the first player, I'd have to look this up again, maybe since Andrew Jones, to have a 2020 season before the age of 21. Like, he's young, he's got all of the tools in his belt.
Yeah.
And I think you look at him, a lot of people calling him kind of like the next Ken Griffey, like the face of the franchise. I would agree. As of right now, he's been absolutely amazing. Lit up the home run derby. He didn't win, or did he win? I don't remember. But like he lit up the home run derby. He's been a star this year. I think it's really good for.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he did win that because he beat Pete Alonso, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
okay.
Won. Yeah. But Rodriguez was way ahead. He came out and he had like 21 home runs, I think, in the first round. But go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love the Mariners story. I think it's a very awesome story for baseball. I think you kind of also see some of because I could only imagine if I was a player in the farm system. Like, I think actually Julio Rodriguez was one of the guys that he had said in his Zoom rant about how, like, the guy's English is terrible. Like, if you're hearing that from your boss, like, from the CEO of where you work, that's got to be very painful.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's a matter of overcoming. And also, I look at a lot of the Mariners fans. Like, I know of a few. Like, from when Ken Griffey Jr., I have a friend that was born and raised in the Seattle area. So he's a big Mariners fan, big Seahawks fan. Like, I can only imagine because they're not going to be happy until that final pitch is made and they finally clinch. But when that happens, how exciting that fan base is going to be. Depending on how they finish, hopefully they can get a couple playoff games because that would be electric at T-Mobile Park. It'll be very interesting because, like, you look at the rest of baseball, like the Yankees have been in the playoffs a lot, the Rays, the Guardians would be interesting too. Minnesota's been there. Houston's been there. The Mets, it's been a couple of years, but they've been there recently. Obviously, the Braves, the Cardinals, the Brewers. Like, there hasn't been a fan base that's been like a long time, and I think that would be.
Yeah.
I think that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think so. That's a great one. And so, yeah, there's no way they're not going to make the playoffs. Although, like I said, they're playing the Braves this week, and I think, but they'll be fine. They've got to make the playoffs. You know, that'll be interesting to follow. All right, man. Go ahead and take us home.
All right, so let's enjoy some football tonight. I know a lot of people are excited about that, but for now, this is Kenny Squared N.
Kenny.
With sports on the positive tip. We will see you guys next week.
Yes, and in the can after we upload this is show number 99. I don't know if you were aware of that. So next week is our 100th show. So we're gonna have to do something.
We just did the Aaron Judge show.
There you go. All right, talk to everybody later.